of The List by Robert Whitlow. If you guys went to the TikTok live, I went to TikTok and did part 2. Today is part 3 on YouTube, and part 4 will be on TikTok not tomorrow, probably on Saturday or Sunday. I'll take a little break because my voice needs a break. But let's get reading. Chapter 5. Usually Rennie traveled light and rarely dressed up unless he had to. For this trip, however, he took his best suit. For all he knew, the members of the list wore tuxedos and sat around in leather chairs, smoking cigarettes and sipping brandy after dinner. Georgetown was north along the coast from Charleston. Rennie retraced his route of the previous weekend, but based on his renewed interest in the ancestry, decided to take a brief detour through Moncks Corner, South Carolina, his mother's hometown. Located an hour inland from the ocean, Moncks Corner was one of the first places settled when the early pioneers left the coast and began to move westward. Now it was a sleepy town in an out-of-the-way corner of the state. Rennie's maternal grandmother had died years before his birth, but his mother's father, Nathaniel Candler, a pharmacist in Moncks Corner, was in good health up to the day he suffered a fatal stroke when Rennie was only 7 years old. Rennie knew that his mother loved her hometown and felt more at rest there than anywhere else. The community was peaceful, sleepy, or dead. Rennie wasn't sure where to draw the line. Just inside the city limits, he pulled into a convenience store for gas. While filling up the tank, he heard a loud flapping sound. Turning, he saw a big red Dodge pickup truck with a flat tire limping into the parking lot beside the store. The left front tire was shredded, and only a few pieces of battered rubber and steel remained on the rim. The truck rolled to a stop. A sole occupant, a dark-haired young woman, went to the store. The truck had a Michigan license plate, and when Rennie went inside to pay for his gas, its driver was handing a phone book back to the clerk. "Thanks. Do you have a phone I can call the tire store?" she asked. The clerk shook her head. "I'm sorry, but only one is working." Feeling chivalrous, Rennie broke into the conversation. "You could use my car phone if you like. I parked out at the pumps." The woman faced Rennie, sized him up with her clear blue eyes. For a second, she said, "Thanks. That would be a lot of help. Let me write down the number down on a piece of paper." Rennie held the door open for you. "Is that your husband's truck?" "No, it was my father's. It's exactly like the truck that went up into the tornado at the end of the movie Twister," she said, smiling. "Yeah, it's a shame about that truck," Rennie answered. "Just a second. I'll be back with the phone." Rennie kicked himself as he walked to the car. What a stupid thing to say. It was a toy truck in the movie. Special effects could do almost anything. He might as well have said, "What happened to Peter Rabbit in Mr. McGregor's garden?" It sure was sad, wasn't it? As he started his car and pulled forward, Rennie had a clear view of the damsel in distress. She was medium height with an oval face framed with fairly short dark hair and loose, casual curls. He guessed she was mid to late 20s, not a Barbie type, but a figure that looked nice in her white shorts and loose-fitting blue shirt. She was only slightly tanned, consistent with Rennie's perception that the people in Michigan lived most of the year in snowbound isolation, coming out occasionally to shovel snow or ride snowmobiles across frozen lakes. Parking next to the truck, he unplugged his car phone and was met by a bright smile, blue eyes, and an outstretched hand. "I'm Joe Johnston," she said. "I really appreciate you taking the time to help me." "Rennie Jacobson." "It's no problem at all. Let me call the store for you. Do you have a full-size spare?" "Yes," she said, "but it's flat too. I didn't check it before leaving on this trip." Rennie knelt beside the truck. He wrote down the size of the tire and called the store. Holding the phone, he asked, "Do you have any road hazard insurance? You shouldn't be driving another block on the wheel rim. It would be better to tow the truck from here to the store." "Yes, I have a policy with Road Rescue," she answered. "Do you tow for Road Rescue?" Rennie turned his attention back to the phone. "Great, we'll wait for you here." Rennie gave the location of the convenience store. "Thanks for your help," she said when Rennie hung up. "I'll wait here until you until the truck comes," he offered. I don't want to hold you up any longer. I'm not in a hurry. My mother grew up in Monk's Corner, and I was going to drive around town for a while before heading to the coast. "What is your name again?" she asked. "Rennie. And you're Joe, right?" "Yes, J-O," she said, spelling out the two-letter name. In a few minutes, the tow truck came into view and stopped with a belch of black smoke. The driver, a middle-aged man with well-developed beer belly that threatened to pop the bottom 3 buttons of his shirt, slid in and walked over to Rennie. A large brown dog hung his head out of the passenger side window of the truck. "Did you call for a wrecker?" he said, taking a half-chewed cigar out of his mouth and spitting a few pieces of stray tobacco onto the ground. "Yes, it's my truck," Joe answered. The driver looked at Joe and looked at the truck. "I'll hook it up. Do you want to ride with me and Hercules?" Rennie spoke up before Joe could answer. "We'll just follow you in my car." "Suit yourself." Rennie and Joe stepped back. "Are you sure I'm not holding you up?" she asked as the wrecker driver crawled into her truck. Rennie grinned. "I don't mind, unless of course you want to hold Hercules in your lap." As they followed the tow truck through the town's central square to hit the tire store, Rennie pointed out the location of his grandfather's pharmacy, now a ladies' clothing store. "He died when I was in 2nd grade. My mother said the drugstore was an institution in the town. My grandfather sold everything from thermometers to red wagons." "What was he like?" He lived here before nationwide drugstore chains drove most of the local-owned pharmacies out of business. In those days, the small-town pharmacist had a respected place in the community. He let most folks get behind the medicine they needed for their children, even when they were behind in paying their bills. Sounds like a real neat gentleman. I guess he was. He was a very religious person, a little extreme. I remember watching him pray out loud, asking God to heal a woman who came in for a prescription. Rennie shook his head. "It seems to me that the divine healing would have cut into business." Rennie turned the air conditioner up a notch. "I guess it's never this hot and humid in Michigan." "Not like this. Makes me wish I was back in my igloo." "I knew it," Rennie laughed. "I always suspected people up north lived in igloos. I bet you have a huge, saggy coat trimmed with fur." "Of course, but it's only cold in the winter. During the summer, the weather is wonderful." "Did you grow up here?" Joe asked. "No, my folks moved to Charleston years ago. I live in Charlotte now, where I work for a law firm. How about you?" "I spent all my life in East Lansing. I went to Michigan State and worked as an operating room nurse in the cardiac wing of a local hospital." "That must be quite the job," Rennie said. "It is. I always wanted to be a nurse, and I went to cardiac OR specialty so I could train with a couple of outstanding doctors at the hospital where I work." Rennie glanced at Joe's left hand resting on her lap. Nice fingers with pretty red nail polish. No engagement ring or wedding ring. She wasn't Miss Heart Doctor yet. Joe made arrangements with a worker at the tire store. It was a small operation, but Joe's truck wouldn't be ready for an hour. It was a little past noon, and Rennie's stomach tank was flashing orange for empty. "Would you like to get something to eat?" he asked. "Sure. I don't have to get to the coast until this evening either." Rennie asked the man at the service desk for a phone book. Turning to the restaurant section, he ran his finger to the modest selection. "Ah, here it is. Monk's Corner Carolina barbecue. Would that be okay with you?" "Sure. I would like to try some authentic food." Rennie gave her a puzzled look. I never thought of barbecue as aesthetic. It's just, well, it's just food. I understand, she said, chuckling. But to someone from Michigan, it is as aesthetic as German sausage would be to you. Rennie asked the serviceman for directions to the restaurant. He wasn't sure the barbecue was an aesthetic dish, but it seemed almost blasphemous to compare it to German sausage. Hi, Rick. Thank you. It's The List by Robert Whitlow. That's what we're reading. We're on part 3, so we're on chapter 5. We're pretty sure I'm reading. I'm gonna try to read 2 chapters. My voice will allow it. Understand. Rennie asked the serviceman for directions to the restaurant. He wasn't sure the barbecue was a. Actually, wait. There you go. The restaurant was less than 5 blocks from the tire store. The low-slung building looked as it was grown out of the red clay. Rennie pulled into the graveling parking lot and pointed to a couple of red smokers the size of 50-gallon drums mounted horizontally on legs and connected to smaller black boxes. Those are smokers. The cooks put 8 to 12 pounds pork shoulders inside, build a fire in adjacent fire boxes, and smoke the heat for 6 or 7 hours. They slice off the fat and cut up the meat, and cook it inside the building for another 30 minutes. Then it's ready for a touch of genius, the sauce. All great chefs are distinguished by their sauces. Yeah, Rennie agreed. However, most guys who run barbecue joints would rather be caught riding in a Mary Carey Cadillac than answer the chef. The Monk's Corner Carolina barbecue restaurant was the genuine article. Genuine article. The outside walls were decorated with the old automobile license plates. A large pink plywood pig stood beside the banged-up front door and announced the hours of operation in green letters across his chest. Rennie and Joe found seats at a bare wooden table under a picture calendar of the local high school football team. The menu, a single laminated sheet, was simple. Barbecue pork sandwich, barbecue pork plates, barbecue pork ribs, or hamburger steak. Brunswick stew, like coastal oysters, was occasionally available. Ask your waitress. Side dishes included baked beans, French fries, onion rings, and slaw. Peach cobbler was the only option to finish off the meal. I thought they made barbecue from beef too, Joe said. Maybe in Texas, but here folks refer to barbecue as barbecue pork pig. Redundant, but it emphasizes the only true barbecue it is made with pork. An overweight waitress, her Monk's Corner Corolla barbecue t-shirt permanently stained by dark red sauce in multiple locations, soldered up to take their order. May I order for you? Rennie asked. I want to make sure you get a comprehensive aesthetic experience. Sure. 2 pork plates with beans, slaw, and sweet tea, please. Do you have stew? The waitress turned her head and yelled toward the back of the room. Fred, is there any stew on? A black-haired man with a 3-day grown-up beard and a completely stained t-shirt leaned out the door and yelled, Yeah? Let me have a bowl of stew, please. 2 thanks, Rennie said. Rennie grinned as the waitress headed to the kitchen. Pretty classy place, isn't it? A little overhead, I'm sure. I wondered if they have a license plate for every state. The license plate motif continued on the inside wall of the restaurant. There's one from Guam and a military place from Saudi Arabia. Michigan is over the cash register, Rennie said, admiring Joe's profile as she turned her head. Speaking of Michigan, do you mind Mind if I ask what brought you here from Michigan to South Carolina? Most folks from the north come in spring to escape the cold, not in the summer to roast in the heat. Joe hesitated for a moment. This is not a vacation. I'm in South Carolina on personal business. The waitress brought their food on large plastic plates divided into 3 sections. Joe leaned forward and said, "I'd like to pray before we eat." Surprised, Rennie simply nodded, and Joe closed her eyes and said, "Father, I thank you for sending Rennie to help me today. Bless his life and purposes for him. Help me see my way clearly this weekend. Thank you for this food. In Jesus' name, amen." Rennie kept his eyes open while Joe prayed, first glancing to see if anyone noticed what was happening, then watching Joe's face. It was more like talking than the type of praying Rennie was familiar with. After she said amen, her eyes popped open and met his. "Thanks. I never thought anyone would say that God used me. It's a noble thought." They both dove into their food. To Rennie's relief, it was a good sample of authentic Southerner fare. The meat was lean and the sauce was sweet with enough spice to tickle your tongue. "Here, taste the stew before I start," he said, dripping Joe's spoon into his bowl, feeding her the bite. "That's good, I like it. What kind of business do you have on the coast?" Joe wiped her mouth and took a sip of tea before answering. "Actually, it's a personal matter related to my father's estate. He died a few months ago." "My father died a few months ago, too." Joe looked and met Rennie's eyes, and their mouths dropped open simultaneously. Are you?" She stared, questioned, then stopped. Rennie picked up. "Going to Georgetown?" Joe nodded, and Rennie remembered La Roche's letter to Mr. Joe Taylor Johnson, leaned back in his chair and laughed, put his fork down and put beside his plate. "So you're Mr. Joe Taylor Johnson," he chuckled, emphasizing the matter. "This is unbelievable." Joe stared past Rennie's shoulder at the far wall of the restaurant, said and muttered, "Incredible." Reaching across the table, Rennie said, "Let me formally introduce myself. I am Josiah Fletchell Jacobson." Joe took Rennie's hand and smiled wanly and continued muttering, "But why?" "You said it in your prayer. You thank God for sending me to you." "This was about the tire, of course. This is just incredible." Rennie glanced around the restaurant. No one was seated near them, and the waitress was cleaning the table by the restrooms. "Well, I guess we can talk openly. No vow of secrecy applies to the members of the list," saying the list cast a sort of curtain around them. "But we're not members yet." Mere formality." "Maybe for you, but I'm a woman, and they think I'm a man. Plus, I wanted to know more about the whole arrangement. What do you know?" Rennie gave her a summary of the past week, leaving out that the only significant bequest to him in his father's will was the list. "You know," he concluded, "the papers I read mentioned transfer of interest from one generation to the next based on primogeniture. The right of the firstborn son is to receive all the father's estate and was about 150 years ago. Surely things are different now." "Think about it, Rennie. If I don't participate, there's no more for the rest of the members, including you. Surely it's not that mercenary group. I don't know any amounts involved, but taped messages my father left me clearly implied there is a lot of money. Plenty for everyone, I would guess." "The richest men in the Bible said, 'Whoever loves money never has enough money.'" Maybe not." Rennie took a last bite of his barbecue and asked, "You don't have any brothers?" "No, I am my father's only child. He wanted a boy, and when I showed up with a pink bow in my hair, he gave me a unisex name. Now I can guess one reason why. They sat in silence for a minute, each in thought. Joe spoke first. Well, I agree with you. Agree with what? Rennie asked. That this is a divine encounter. God is in our meeting. I just don't know how. Joe looked at Rennie questioningly. Rennie was not used to this God talk. To him, God was the great cosmic clockmaker, a skilled craftsman who constructed the universe, wound the key, and he went off to do his own thing. The thought of God was personally involved in an individual's life, enough to set up a meeting between two people in Monarch's Corner, South Carolina, was new. Normally, he would have politely avoided someone who talked like Joe, but he had an immediate attraction to her that overruled his natural response. The waitress came to clear the plates from the table. We have peach cobbler, she mentioned nonchalantly. Any ice cream to go with it? Turning toward the kitchen, she yelled, Fred, we got any ice cream in the cooler? Fred's unshaven face made an appearance for a repeat performance. Yeah? I would like some of that too, please. Joe? No, thanks. Since we're not two ships passing in the night, tell me about you and your family. Rennie settled back in his seat. There's obviously some connection between our families in the past. Okay, but I better give you the Reader's Digest condensed version. My mother's family immigrated to America from Norway in the 1800s and settled in the lower peninsula of Michigan. With a Scandinavian background, you would think I would have blonde hair, but my mother and I are both brunettes. My parents divorced when I was 2 years old, and my mother remarried a couple years later. My stepfather, whom I consider my real dad, was a physics professor at Michigan State. He died of cancer when I was 12, and my mom has never remarried. She's an amateur naturalist and bird watcher, traveling all over the world to sit for hours in hopes of spotting rare species of a bird. I went to Africa with her once. What about your father? Rennie asked as the waitress set his cobbler on the table. He was a consulting engineer, specializing in the bridge building. He was raised in Roanoke, Virginia, and went to Virginia Tech. He came to Michigan on a job, met my mother, and asked her to marry him. I was born within a year. He traveled all over the country in his work while on a job in California. Wrote my mother a letter telling her he had met someone and wanted a divorce. Of course, I don't remember anything about that time. He filed for divorce and I did not see him for 15 years. I think he was divorced and remarried 5 times. Crazy, but it's true. Did he have any other children? Not as far as I know. He came to my high school graduation, gave me a check for $60,000 to pay for my college education, and left immediately after the ceremony. I wrote him several times while I was in college, but he never wrote back. About 2 years ago, he called me at my mother's house on Christmas Day. I think he had been drinking again. We talked a few times, and he told me how much he loved me after he died. I asked if I could see him, and he hung up. The next news I received was a call from a lawyer in Chicago. He told me my father was dead. That was a sole beneficiary in his will. How did he die? He suffered a massive heart attack while driving the red truck you saw at the convenience store. He had it at a spotlight. The truck slowly rolled forward and swerved into a ditch. He was in Chicago and apparently had been to the grocery store because there were several bags of groceries behind the front seat. He was dead when the ambulance arrived. He was only 53 and had no record of heart trouble. The lawyer had a copy of the autopsy, and the doctor who performed the autopsy, and he said your father's heart exploded. That's right, but Rennie shrugged. It's like I'm hearing about my own father. Go ahead. I would have expected suicide if not for the autopsy report. He had already been buried when I got the call. No funeral, no, just a simple marker in a Chicago cemetery. My journey here began when I went to the lawyer's office. I can imagine. How did it all come up? My father was not remarried at the time of his death. He had been several years since his last marriage ended in divorce. All the failed marriages, divorces, and unknown tragedies had depleted his financial resources. And at the time of his death, he did not have a whole lot except a modest bank account and the truck. The lawyer who had contacted me did not prepare the will. A lawyer in Valparaiso, Indiana, drafted it, and he had retired and moved to Florida. The educator was a man who worked at Chicago Bank, where my father kept his money. He delivered the will to the lawyer after my father's death. Did the will mention the list? Yes, I met with a lawyer and a nice old gentleman who told me everything was straightforward about the estate except for a reference to an organization called the Covenant List of South Carolina Limited. He wanted to know if I knew what it was. I told him no. He also told me that a copy of my father's obituary was sent to 9 men listed in a separate item in the will. I looked at the list and didn't know any of the men. I thought that was because they all lived in the South. They might be cousins or other relatives. The lawyer also gave me an envelope addressed to me from my father. Rennie went for the daily double. Inside was a casket and a key to a post office box. Half right. It was a letter and a post office box key. Would you like to read the letter? Sure. Rennie scooped up the last bite of cobbler and ice cream while Joe picked up her purse. Reaching inside, she took out a plain white envelope and handed it to Rennie. Joe's full name was scrawled in a spindly script across the front. Taking out 3 sheets of lined notebook paper, Rennie read silently, slowly at first, then faster as he dabbed into the writing. A second. Sorry, my throat, bro. Dear Joe, I just hung up the phone after talking with you, and I just wanted to say yes when you wanted to see me, but I believe it was best that you have no personal contact with me. My life has been marked by nothing but tragedy for myself and those around me. I have failed as a husband and a father, and my words here are crippled messages of what should have been said and done. Please forgive me for not truly being a father to you. I can do nothing about it except now ask you to forgive me. I am convinced part of my problems have come from deception I perpetrated. I know this sounds strange to you, but it has nothing to do with the Covenant List of South Carolina. I usually refer to it by its members as the list formed in Georgetown, South Carolina during the Civil War. The list was a cooperative venture of 11 families to pressure financial security in the face of certain ruin near the edge of the war. Working together, they were able to transfer gold and silver out of the South before Caesar by the North. This group has continued to the present time, with membership passing to the eldest male of each generation. The current assets of the list are enormous. I took the membership down upon the death of my father, but every dollar I have withdrawn has been lost through bad investments and business deals. I now believe I have made a serious mistake by deceiving the members of the list about you. I know it sounds archaic in this day, but I was concerned I would lose our stake in the money if they knew you were a girl. There was not been a major distribution of the funds from the list for years. I hoped I would live to see my share transferred into my name so I could give it to you. Then even if you couldn't succeed as a member of the list, you would still get something from it. Since you are reading this letter, my plan has failed, just like everything else. I will let you choose what you want to do. I have left instructions for the members of the list to receive a notification of my death. They will schedule a meeting in Georgetown to install you on the list because they will think you are my son. Enclosed in the post office box key for a branch office in Chicago and Ashland Avenue. We communicate only via post office boxes. A notice will be sent for you there. The existence of the list is secret. No one knows about it but the members. Upon joining, we will all take a series of vows, including the ones of secrecy and truthfulness. My mother never knew about the list. Your mother never knew either. I don't know what you should do. All I know is that everyone has been honored the vow of secrecy. I broke the vow of truthfulness. I lied and have paid the consequences. I don't know if it's better for you to run from it or face it. Do what seems right to you. Goodbye, Dad. Rennie folded the letter and put it down on the table, shaking his head. Crippled messengers. I'm sorry. I cried off and on for a week. His life slipped through the hands like sand, never taking form, never having substance. The letter explained some things, but raised more questions than I had before reading it. Did you talk to your mother? Selectively. She knew I went to Chicago and met with the lawyer. She was aware of the known estate, but I didn't tell her about the letter or the list. I wasn't sure reopening her pain was the responsible thing to do. I wanted to sort it out myself. This is what the trip is about. Rennie looked into Joe's eyes again. He saw steel they hadn't noticed before. It took a lot of courage for you to get in his truck and come down here. I thought it over from every angle. In the end, I decided I had to see what this thing is all about for myself. Rennie pulled his chair close to the table. I have a proposal. Do you want to hear it? Joe raised her eyebrows. What? First, let me buy you lunch. Agreed? Agreed. She smiled. Second, you follow me to Georgetown. Who knows? You may have another flat. Agreed? She smiled slightly. Agreed. Third, you have supper with me tonight at the nicest seafood restaurant we can find in Georgetown. Agreed? Agreed. If we go Dutch treat. We'll negotiate that last stipulation later. Then mustering every ounce of earnestness he possessed, he said, Fourth, I want to help you through this situation. Agreed? Joe considered Rennie's offer for a moment. I'm not sure. We don't know what's involved, and we just met an hour ago. Well, we're together so far, and you said I was divinely sent to you. Are you serious? Very serious. Agreed, she said, hint of smiling returning. Let's shake on it. Rennie extended his right hand across the table. Joe placed her left hand in his and squeezed tightly. Rennie was unprepared for what he felt. A brief, intense tinkle, almost as strong as a low-voltage shock, swept his arms down his back and vanished. Startled, he looked at Joe. Her eyes met his, but her face revealed nothing. Good, he said, not at all sure what he meant or what had happened. They walked to the cash register where 5 bottles of Monk's Corner barbecue sauce stood at attention. Fred came out of the kitchen. Rennie handed him 20. The food was good, especially the stew. My compliments to the chef. Yeah, Fred's eyes narrowed as he handed Rennie his change. Chapter 6. Let's see how long this one is. 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. About 5 pages. Alright. Joe's truck was ready when they returned from lunch. After she paid for the tire, Rennie walked her back to the truck. I'll take you through the Francis Marion National Forest, he said. It's the most scenic route to Georgetown from there. Who was Francis Marion? A Revolutionary War hero known as Swamp Fox. Fine, just keep me away from any alligators. Traveling seldom, used to lame roads, Rennie set a leisurely pace. It was a little less than an hour's drive from Monk's Corner to Georgetown, and Rennie spent most of the time replaying his lunch with Joe, occasionally casting covert glances toward her in the rear of the mirror. Between his thoughts and glances, it seemed only a few minutes until they passed city limit sign. Georgetown was almost as old as Charleston, but much smaller. Nestled beside the Winna Bay near the confluence of Black and Pt.3 rivers, because innumerable rivers, streams, and inlets intersected the rainy low country coast, with some of the earliest settlers found in this area suitable for growing rice. Within a generation, thousands and thousands of slaves toiled in the rice paddles and dispersed along the low-lying coastal area. Georgetown became the point of arrival for the slave ships and point of shipment for the bags of rice produced by the slaves' back-breaking labor. Only a handful of antebellum homes and other pre-war Civil War structures dotted the modern Georgetown waterfront. The largest of these relics, the Rice Planters Inn, faced Front Street, 1 block from the bay. A rectangular structure, the 3-story inn was the oldest continuous operating hotel in South Carolina. Built by a sea captain from slave trading profits, the green structure had survived the storm, war, and pressures of 20th century economics. They parked in the back of the inn. "Welcome to Georgetown," Rennie said when they got out of their vehicles. "Whew, it's muggy." "That's why. Slow things down the closer you get to the coast. People can get in a big hurry. It just makes them and their cars overheat faster." They climbed the steps to the front porch, a wide expanse that circled the building. Several ceiling fans vainly stirred into the air. No one sat in the row of white rattan chairs lined up in the porch rail. Inside, they entered a dark, cool foyer. "The air conditioning works," Rennie said. "That's a good sign." To the left of the entrance was a front desk. A clerk who looked nearly as ancient as the inn gave them a raspy greeting. "Welcome to the Rice Planters Inn. May I help you?" "Hello, I am J.F. Jacobson. I should have a room reserved for the weekend." The man squinted at the large date book a moment, then, as if he had made a surprising discovery, said, "Ah, yes, here it is. Josiah Fletcher Jacobson. You have room 6. It's located at the east end of the 2nd floor. May I help you and Mrs. Jacobson with your luggage?" It was Rennie's turn to look surprised. "This is not Mrs. Jacobson." "I see." The clerk squinted and narrowed further. "This is Joe Taylor Johnson. She should have a reservation of her own." "It may be under Mr. Joe Taylor Johnson," Joe added. The clerk examined Joe and, satisfied that she was female, ran his finger down the right of the reservation book. "Here it is. You are correct. It is under the name of Mr. Johnson. Is Mr. Johnson coming?" Rennie interjected. "She is Mr. Johnson. I mean, the reservation is for her because her name is Joe Taylor Johnson." The clerk put both hands on the ledge that separated him from Rennie and Joe, paused, thought for several seconds as reaching a momentous decision, handed Joe a key and said, "You have room 12 at the S. Wend Hall of the third floor. If Mr. Johnson should arrive, I will notify you, and you will have to find another place to stay." Joe chuckled as they climbed the stairs to the second floor. I felt like I was on to tell the truth. Was the real Joe Taylor Johnson please stand up? The second floor had 6 rooms, 3 overlooking the street in front of the house, 3 facing the bay. Rennie opened the door to the modest-sized room, simply furnished with a large 4-poster bed, a beautiful armoire that took place of the closet, and a couple chairs. The wall on the left opened to a small bath. Joe's room upstairs was the same size, but had a smaller bed, a tiny closet, and a finely cracked vanity sink. I can wash my face like great-grandmother did on the plantation. By tonight, I'll be a Southern belle. Your Michigan accent will need some work before you take your Southern belle test, Rennie responded. I could take lessons. Wait here, I'll get your luggage, Rennie said. Southern belles don't carry anything heavier than a parasol. Right, but as you said, I have not passed my test yet. They carried the luggage without the desk clerk's help. Rennie was concerned the old man wouldn't have survived the trip up to the 3rd floor. Besides, Rennie wanted to handle the old trunk himself. As he lifted it out of the back of the Porsche, Joe asked, "What is that?" "We'll talk about supper," Rennie said quickly. "Is it 7:30, okay? You'll have time for a nap, if you like." "Yes, that would be great." Once in his room, Rennie lay down on the bed, stared at the ceiling, and replayed the afternoon's events. He lingered at the moment he held Joe's hand in the restaurant, a strange but pleasant experience. He had never felt anything quite like the sensation that came over him from a simple touch. An attractive woman, Joe excluded life, and Rennie wanted to get to know her better. Also, they had an involuntary link because of the list. She was the only woman on earth with whom he could discuss it. A shared secret, a joint adventure, a common challenge, inexorably draws people together. Closing his eyes, he began to unwind. Tomorrow would be soon enough to meet a room full of old men. Tonight he wanted to eat something more than seafood, have a good time with Joe, and maybe do a little more than touch her hand. He dozed off with pleasant thoughts. Joe poured some cool water into the metal basin, nestled in the water stand, and splashed her face and dried it with a soft green hand towel. Because her room faced the rear of the house, she pulled a chair to the window so she could look out over the bay. Directly in front of her, 2 shrimp boats gently swayed at anchor, their nets draped over their sides like old-fashioned paracoats drying on a clothesline. Farther out, a small loop, hoping to find a breeze in the bay, motored slowly away from shore. She wanted the peaceful scene of several minutes. She, too, wondered about the effect of Rennie's touch of the restaurant. Staring out the window, she remembered an incident at the hospital in April. She was working in the OR during 5-level bypass procedures for a 45-year-old man, Dr. Leonard Starks. The cardiologist had harvested veins from the patient's leg and had completed the last of the 5 bypasses. When he ordered the patient brought off the heart-lung machine, the patient's vital signs began to drop. Joe had her hand in the man's chest, holding a clamp, and silently began praying for her patient. At the moment the man's heart should have resumed beating, nothing happened. In the operating room erupted in activity. Joe intensified silent petition. An inner voice whispered, "Touch him." And as soon as she briefly laid her free hand on his arm, A warm tingle followed her. The man's heart fluttered slightly, then started beating. It's beating! One of the OR techs yelled in her ear. Dr. Starks had completed the final portion of the surgery, and the man had full recovery without any residual damage to the heart muscle. Joe was ecstatic. The sensation in the restaurant had been the same. Dressed in light kayak slacks and white shirt with sleeves partly rolled up, Rennie knocked on Joe's door at 7:25. Come in! I'm almost ready. She was wearing a yellow and white sundress. Barefoot, she sat in a small chair near the window and strapped on some white sandals. For an instant, Rennie wished he was a shoe salesman and he could help her put them on. Looking up, she smiled. That's it. Let's go. Neither spoke as they descended the stairs. Holding the front door open, Rennie followed Joe onto the porch. Let's walk, Rennie said. The desk clerk told me about a restaurant 2 blocks down the street. A restaurant, a rectangular building, not much bigger than a train car, and nestled beside the bay in a small grassy area next to the wharf. Rennie and Joe sat at the table for two beside a window overlooking a restored frigate resting at anchor. Tea with lime, please, Rennie told a young waiter. Joe ordered the same. They sat in silence for a few moments. Joe spoke first. Let's relax. That's easy to do over a plate of barbecue, Rennie said. Then let's consider today's lunch as our first date, Joe suggested. Sounds good to me. The waiter took their order. Joe selected a blackened salmon. Rennie opted for broiled scallops. After the waiter left, Joe said, Tell me about the trunk. It looks pretty old. It was my father's, or at least had possession of it for a number of years. He held an official position with the list, something called a custodian? What kind of custodian? He kept possession of the original list agreement, an old ledger book that contains the covenant signed during Civil War, and a record of all the members down 3 years. Our ancestors had signed it, a cassette tape from my father, and a letter from Desmond LaRoche ordered me to bring it in for the meeting tomorrow. Cassette tape? I better start at the beginning. You had a letter from your father. I had a cassette message from mine. Rennie told Joe about the safe and deposit box and cassette tape from his father. Did he say anything personal to you? Not unless Carpe Diem counts as personal. It was very businesslike, typical of my father. It did not surprise me that he didn't say anything personal and really didn't think about it. I was so stunned by the existence of the list. Don't you think it's strange that he didn't say he loved you or really miss you? Not really. I can't remember him saying he loved me. He sounds so cold-hearted. Rennie bristled. Joe was right, and it stung. I guess he thought it showed in other ways. He would, Rennie stumbled, unable to think of an example. Joe softened. I know there are many ways of demonstrating love, and it's still important to say the words. You were to read my father's letter to me. He never showed his love, although I don't mean to be disrespectful to your father. It sounds like he never really let you know how he felt either. I don't disagree with you, Rennie admitted, except my father came from a reserved family, and I love you was not part of their family vocabulary. Then someone needs to break the cycle. Hearing Joe's talk gave Rennie a tightness in his chest, a sense that there was something inside that could not get out. Joe continued. Several years ago, a major magazine did a survey of the 3 phrases most people want to hear. Number 1 was I love you. Guess number 2. Feeling the constriction in his chest, Rennie ventured. The check is in the mail? Joe smiled. Good answer for a lawyer. Actually, number 2 was I forgive you. Unforgiveness and broken relationships go hand in hand. Grudges can't be a problem, Rennie said, remembering one he carried like a sharp nail in his pocket involving a former girlfriend who had lied to him. Number 3 is appropriate for us tonight. Rennie erased the picture of his old girlfriend from his mind. Let's see. He glanced out the window at the water. How about surf's up? Joe laughed. We're at the beach. It's too narrow. The waiter set their food on the table. Good timing. The third thing people most want to hear is dinner's ready. Hi, Desiree. The food was good, but Joe's presence made the meal superlative. Rennie had never met anyone quite like her. With most people, the eyes are the windows of the soul, and Joe was no exception. Her eyes could shift quickly from challenging to quizzical and to compassionate. She was open, her openness was flowing as honestly and had a I got nothing to hide attitude that was unclouded sunshine. There was something indefinable about her. She was attractive, but there was something more. She had a delight of personality, and there was something more. She was intelligent, but there was something more. He could not put his finger on it, but whatever it was, he liked it. When Rennie described some of his experiences growing up, she leaned forward as she was listening with her whole body, not just her ears. She was undeniably, completely alive. Rennie ordered dessert to fill his spot for sweets and prolong their time at the table. Key lime pie with 2 forks, please. While they waited, Joe said, I'd like to see the trunk sometime. You will, since I may not have it after tomorrow. You can look when we go back to the inn. They finished the pie. Rennie paid without protest from Joe, and they stepped out in the fading light of the August evening, walking slowly over to the restored Fiji as a steady ocean breeze cooled their faces. They stood silently while 3 fishing boats chugged out of the harbor to begin their night's work. Rennie wanted to reach out and take Joe's hand in his, but something was restrained him. In usual circumstances, holding a date's hand in a peaceful moment would have been natural, casual response to a pleasant evening, but this was different. He cast a furtive glance in Joe's direction. She was facing the bay, watching the fishing boats, her silhouette etched against a pinkish-red sunset. Rennie felt a tightness in his chest return, but he felt no pain. Taking a deep breath, he slowly exhaled. At the sound, Joe turned her head toward him. Beautiful, isn't it? Yes, it is. Rennie took a deep breath. Let's walk back along the wharf. They strolled toward the inn, taking a short detour onto the weathered blackboards of the dock to inspect a sleek overnighter to rock to sleep in its slip. The desk clerk was on the phone when he came through the door. Come up to my room, mademoiselle, Rennie said with an exaggerated French accent as he started up the stairs. I would like to show you my rare stamp collection. Is that a Charleston French accent? Mais oui. As I exhaust my repertoire of my French language. Rennie unlocked the door and switched lights on. Joe sat in a small wooden chair as Rennie pulled the old chest on the bed. There is no pirate gold in here. He quickly dialed the combination, opened the trunk, and took out the list. Rennie handed her the old book. Here's the ledger with the original agreement. There's some other stuff you may want to look at after you read the book. Joe rubbed her hand across the cover and opened it and began reading. At one point, she stopped, closed her eyes for a moment, then continued. Rennie watched her face as her eyes went back and forth over the lines, but he did not interrupt her. She flipped through the pages, looking for her ancestors, pausing at each one. Closing the book, she looked up at Rennie. It's real, isn't it? Yeah, I know what you mean. What was your reaction when you first read it? Rennie thought back to the moment on the aisle palms. I thought about the effects of compound interest. $110,000 expanding and multiplying since 1863. How much money is involved today? Then I won't wonder about practical matters, the subsequent of history of the agreement, the decisions made by investments, the frequency of the amount of distribution. You know, what a banker or accountant would like to know. Later, I started wondering about more about the people, my ancestors, what they were like, how they lived, how they died. I even called my father's older sister and went to see her so I can learn more about the men who signed the book. What did you find out? Stories of prosperity mixed with personal tragedy, the cycle of life, I guess. Life without God, Joe muttered. What do you mean? My ancestors were Christians. You'll find them in the grave cemeteries of the oldest churches in South Carolina. Where someone's buried is not proof of their Christianity. I don't know what you mean, Rennie said. You read about what it said about God and the Supreme Being in the original agreement. These men established the list for the good of their families. Isn't that a Christian thing to do? Maybe. Don't take me wrong, Rennie, but words and substances are not always synonymous. It's not whether they're buried or the sincerity of their motivation that counts. I'm just wondering about the results, or as the Bible says, the fruit of their lives and as after entering into this agreement. Remember what my father said in his letter. I don't think you can evaluate this based on the Bible or your father's vague fears. He was obviously something of a misfit. As soon as he said misfit, Rennie wished she could take it back. Jo bit her lip and nodded. You're probably right about him. I guess he looks like a bum to a Charleston blue butt. She handed him the ledger and stood to leave. Wait, I'm sorry. Please don't go. I understand. It's okay. I just need some time alone. Thanks for dinner. Hearing her steps as she hurried down the hill, Rennie shut the door and threw the book on the bed. The initial dinner meeting with the members of the list was not until 7 o'clock the next evening, and he had hoped to spend the next day with Jo, taking her a ride up the coast, maybe going for a walk on the beach. Now he would be looking for seashells alone. He repacked the trunk, berating himself for not watching his words. Jo wiped away the final tears that had coursed down her cheeks as she hurried down the hall and climbed the stairs to her room. Rennie's callous comment reached the dam of pent-up emotion that still flowed from grief over her father's tragic life and death. After splashing her face in the vanity sink, she put on her nightgown and sat in bed. Leaning against the headboard, as her breathing stilled, she prayed a simple prayer and waited for a familiar inner calm, the peace that passed all understanding. After a few minutes, she reached for her Bible and read a psalm, turned off the light, and went to sleep. During the night, she dreamed she was on board a frigate that, like one anchored near the restaurant. She was a passenger, the only woman aboard. A storm was brewing, and the ship began to toss to and fro, and a junior officer on the ship came and asked her if she had seen the ship's maps because the captain had misplaced them. She said she would look for them. When she got to her cabin, she found a map rolled up in the chair, but when she tried to take it to the young officer, she could not find him. The ferocity of the storm increased, and searching with increased anxiety, she lurched onto the deck, stopped, and cried out for help. Rennie tossed and turned for almost an hour. Finally, he switched on the light and found a piece of stationery with the end's name across the top. The sheet of pimento tree in one corner and a rice plant in the other. He quickly sketched in black ink as a seashell a simple picture of two people walking on the beach. Under the picture, he wrote, "Once again, I apologize. I would like to take you up for a ride up on the coast. I'll be on the back porch at 9 this morning for your RCVP. Sincerely, Rennie." He looked at the word sincerely as he had never seen it before. It had so much meaning in that moment. He was sincere about the apology, sincere about wanting to spend the day with Joe. Honestly, equal to vulnerability. He was going to be vulnerable with Joe. Seemed the least likely person he had met in a long while to take advantage of someone's openness. Folding the note, he put it in an envelope, slipped on a pair of pants, and quickly went quietly up the stairs to Joe's room. Sliding the note under the door, he started to offer a quick prayer, but decided it was not the situation warranted disputing of the Almighty. Besides, he was probably mad at Rennie too. Chapter 7. When we get to it, I don't know when I'm gonna go live next. And oh my gosh. It may be Sunday for chapter 7 and 8. I need to my voice needs to take a breath, takes a breather. And I like to do other voices too for the book. I need to get better at them. And I find it hard to do boy voices. But the girl voices are better. I might switch to a British accent for the narrating and probably make doing the other voices easier. But thank you for those who liked. Thank you so much. And for the views, thank you guys for watching. And I will see you next time. Love you guys.